The life of Gypsy Blanchard has to be one of the most bizarre, most tragic, and most unusual cases that's ever reached the light of day. Her story is one of captivity that ended in murder. The world was divided on whether or not she was a desperate victim who acted justifiably, and the other half believed she was just as attention-seeking and cold-blooded as the mother that she killed. The twists never stop with this case, and just when you think you've made up your mind, the events that play out catapult you into another direction. This is the story of Gypsy Rose Blanchard, a child raised by a monster and an adult that either made a desperate bid for freedom or one that exacted the ultimate revenge. I'll leave the final verdict on her guilt or innocence over to you to decide. Gypsy Rose Alcida Blanchard was born to 24-year-old Claudine Dee Dee Blanchard and her 18-year-old husband Rod. Gypsy was a perfectly healthy, thriving baby. She was on time with all of her milestones, and despite her parents' divorce just months after she was born, little Gypsy was a smiley and happy little girl. But the moment that marriage fractured, Gypsy became Dee Dee's sole obsession, the thing she could control, the person she could fix of whatever new condition she could think of that week. It started with Dee Dee putting baby Gypsy on her chest while she slept because she was afraid that her child would stop breathing in her sleep. Sleep apnea, Dee Dee decided. But when all the medical tests showed that Gypsy did not have any kind of sleep disorder, Dee Dee remained resolute. Her daughter had sleep apnea, and that was that. After seeking out several doctors, one of them finally prescribed a breathing apparatus called a CPAP used to treat sleep apnea. Dee Dee's theories were validated, and this first major intervention into Gypsy's health on behalf of a mother's intuition was just the beginning of the twisted snowball of worries she threw on her little daughter. Regardless of what any doctor or test said, she knew in her gut that Gypsy was sick. This was now Dee Dee's one and only purpose in life, proving that her daughter would die without her. Next came seizures. Then Dee Dee swore that Gypsy's eyesight was poor. And after that, she was sure that Gypsy was partially deaf, all before Gypsy was 3 years old. Now, putting the obvious Munchausen by proxy going on here aside for a second, notice that all of these conditions can only be diagnosed while they are in the process of happening or based on the mother's word. And if today's doctor couldn't prescribe her seizure medication, then Dee Dee would shop around for the next doctor who would. Glasses, hearing aids, and an unholy amount of antibiotics for imaginary fevers and aches that only occurred at home. By the time Gypsy was 5, her teeth started falling out thanks to the outrageous cocktail of medication she was on. If you're wondering where Rod was in all of this, Dee Dee just wore him down like she did everyone else. He couldn't visit today because they had a doctor's appointment. He couldn't visit a week later because they were visiting family. And on the rare occasion he did manage to get in touch with his little girl, Dee Dee wouldn't allow him to take Gypsy to the park or anywhere that she wasn't hovering over them with a judgmental and overbearing eye. He and his new wife truly believed that she was just as frail as Dee Dee told them she was. But Dee Dee didn't just want to keep Gypsy to herself, she also wanted to hide the absolute filth that they lived in. The only place inside that home that was not buried under piles of dirty dishes and clothes was the medicine closet. Yes, you heard that right. A whole closet was reserved for the hundreds of medications that Gypsy was on. Everything from epileptic drugs to straight-up Vicodin. If any sane person had walked into that home, they'd have realized that Gypsy was in real danger of dying, not from any of her imaginary conditions, but instead, she could very well be killed by the insane amount of drugs that were being pumped into her by her own mother. Next came Dee Dee's insistence that Gypsy, who had run and played just like any other kid her age before, now had muscular dystrophy. She tried to get Gypsy to walk with a walker for months, much to her child's confusion. But when Gypsy was 7, she and her maternal grandfather got into a minor motorcycle accident that resulted in a small scab on Gypsy's knee. Gypsy, shaken and confused, was much more agreeable to accept that her legs weren't working after that point. Her mother made her sit in a wheelchair whenever they stepped foot outside the house. It didn't help that Dee Dee loudly proclaimed that Gypsy was slow and mentally challenged to everyone and anyone who'd listen. Gypsy, with no formal education up to this point and barely any interaction with anyone besides her mentally ill mother, genuinely thought she was unintelligent. Her lack of social interaction and the constant earful she got about how her brain was underdeveloped shaped a timid child that spoke only in a high-pitched squeak. a girl that had no other personality other than her long list of imaginary diseases and conditions. When Gypsy was fitted with a feeding tube, Dee Dee had more control over her daughter's illnesses than ever before. She started adding medications through the tube that weren't just unnecessary, they were causing actual damage to Gypsy's health. The acid reflux that the meds caused damaged Gypsy's esophagus permanently. She barely had any teeth left, her organs were constantly inflamed, and her hair fell out, leaving bald patches. Gypsy truly believed that her mother was the only one in this world who loved her, and without her mother, she had no one. And on the rare occasion that she disobeyed or questioned anything, Gypsy was starved for days as punishment. She was beaten with coat hangers and force-fed more drugs to sedate her. But then, Gypsy saw the movie Rapunzel, a tale of a princess being forcefully kept inside a tower by a witch who claimed to be her mother. And for the 14-year-old, the world around her started to untangle, and her mother's madness suddenly didn't seem so normal anymore. Don't get me wrong here. Gypsy didn't have some eye-opening aha moment, but the seed was planted that maybe her legs weren't weak, maybe she wasn't stupid, and maybe, just maybe, she wasn't so sick after all. Then Hurricane Katrina happened and the Blanchards lost their home. The world descended upon this sickly child and her superhero mother who'd lost everything, including all of Gypsy's medical records. Several charities gave them trips to Disney, all expenses paid cruises, and even a brand spanking new house. And now, the new set of doctors in a new city only had Dee Dee's word to go off to start Gypsy's new slew of treatments and tests. According to Dee Dee, Gypsy was treated for cancer at one point, explaining her newly shaved head, and falsified a new birth certificate to claim that Gypsy was 4 years younger than her actual age. This wasn't a hard lie to sell. Gypsy was now a teenager who was almost exclusively fed formula through a feeding tube, severely stunting her growth. One of their charity-funded trips included regular visits to conventions because Gypsy loved Disney so much. When Gypsy was 20 years old, believing she was 16, she tried to run away with a man at one of these conventions. In retaliation, Dee Dee destroyed her computer and chained Gypsy to the bed for 3 days without food. But Gypsy, only partially literate, had taught herself to become proficient enough with a computer to create various Facebook accounts and was even on a Christian dating site. That's where she met 24-year-old Nicholas Godejohn. Secretly, they started a relationship online, talked about sex and running away together to elope, all concepts that were completely new to the now 21-year-old. For 2 years, they kept their relationship strictly to message boards before they ever laid eyes on each other. The plan was that they would run into each other like complete strangers at a live-action Disney performance, hit it off, and Dee Dee would fall in love with Nicholas without ever knowing that the two of them had actually known each other for 2 years. That plan failed miserably because Dee Dee hated the creepy man hanging around a children's show, but luckily, she didn't realize that the two of them knew each other. She whisked Gypsy away in her wheelchair, and the couple knew that there was never going to be a way out of this house of horrors. If Gypsy was going to escape, they had to take matters into their own hands. Gypsy is convinced that Dee Dee needs to die in order for her to escape. There is no other way. If they try to run, the world will hunt them down and return her to her mother based on the fact that everyone believes that Gypsy is mentally handicapped and that she died without a caregiver. And Gypsy isn't completely wrong about that. Every family member and every doctor genuinely believes that Dee Dee is telling the truth, and there are no medical records left to prove otherwise. Dee Dee is Supermom, and Gypsy, well, Gypsy is the sickly teenager who cannot walk, read, or make informed decisions on her own. They've never seen the inside of that house. No one's witnessed the abuse, the filth, or the years-long stream of threats that Gypsy has no one else but Dee Dee who cares about her. To Gypsy, there was no other solution to get out of this living hell than to kill her own mother, and Nick was willing to free her. On the 10th of June 2015, Dee Dee took her sleeping pills for the night, and Gypsy let Nick in through the back door. While she hid in the bathroom, covering her ears, Nick stabbed Dee Dee 17 times until she stopped moving. The two then proceeded to have sex in Gypsy's bedroom, stole $4,000 in cash, and walked out the door. For the first time that Gypsy could remember, she walked outside on her own 2 legs a month before her 24th birthday. They hid out in a motel room for 3 days, only leaving to buy food and to mail the knife back to Nick's residence so that they could dispose of it later. Gypsy thought that the $4,000 would be enough to last them for years. That's how naive she was about the concept of money. She'd just never worked with cash before and had no concept of how buses even worked. Gypsy, not wanting her mother to lie undiscovered, logged into Dee Dee's Facebook and updated her status with this message. When Dee Dee's brutalized remains are discovered, the entire country erupts with worry. Now, there's a missing girl out there, and the only one who knew how to manage and treat her numerous conditions was now dead. Everyone was sure that Gypsy, without her mother's care, would only have days to live without her medicine and her heaven-sent caregiver. When they tracked the location of where the status update came from, it didn't take long to unravel this terrible murder-kidnapping. There, in Nick's house, stood Gypsy, upright and without tubes or a wheelchair to keep her sustained. Dee Dee's extended family, Gypsy's own father, stepmother, and stepsister were all dumbfounded when she walked into court without her wheelchair. Their world crashed around them when they realized that the rumors of abuse that trickled out after Gypsy's arrest weren't just true, it was worse than any of them could have ever imagined. It wasn't just them. This was the worst case of Munchausen's by proxy that the legal system had ever seen. Gypsy and Nick didn't deny what they'd done, but how guilty were they really? Gypsy, crippled by isolation and constant overmedication, was emotionally stunted. Her life of abuse, both physical, emotional, and chemical, had left her with the maturity of a child. She'd convinced herself that she was the living embodiment of Rapunzel and Nick was her rider Flynn. She truly believed that her captivity had no other remedy than murder. The police wouldn't help her because her mother said they wouldn't. Her father wouldn't save her because Dee Dee said he hated Gypsy. No one wanted a crippled, sickly girl, or so Dee Dee had always maintained. So, in the end, Dee Dee's emotional threats to isolate Gypsy would end up being the reason that her abused daughter genuinely thought that killing her was the only way that she could escape. Nick, in turn, was convinced simply because Gypsy was so sure. It's not like Gypsy was lying, she had told him the truth. Her abuse was every bit as real as she claimed. Somewhere along the way, Nick forgot that there were other ways to get Gypsy out of that situation that would have been completely legal. The majority of the world felt that Gypsy wasn't mentally fit to stand trial, that her 24-year-long horrendous abuse didn't just validate her actions, they believed that Dee Dee did not deserve justice for her hideous sins. But Gypsy did commit murder, or at least conspired and orchestrated her mother's death, and for that she was sentenced to 10 years for second-degree murder. Up until her release in late 2023, after serving 8 of her 10 years, Gypsy had the world rallied behind her, but just a few months into her freedom, the public turned on her like rabid dogs. And now, I have some opinions that a lot of people aren't going to like. Here you have a 32-year-old woman with the worldly development of a child. She has never had any sense of freedom in all her life. And now that she's out, she's being hauled from one interview to the next. She's got a reality TV show, and there isn't a day where she's not hounded by cameras. Every relationship, every reunion, and every major milestone is filmed, and the people behind the lens are giving her praises left and right, while the world mocks her poor decisions. Gypsy never got the normal she was so desperate to achieve, and I despise the media for selling her out and the public for judging her by normal human standards. Gypsy's never known normal, so we cannot expect her to act normally, or, at the very least, allow her to catch up to the world that she was denied for her entire life. Make the mistakes and fumbles that we've all had to go through, get up from those hurdles, and to do so without being under a constant microscope of judgment. Do I agree with her decision since she got out, or even that she murdered her captor? No, I do not. But I am not going to highlight those mistakes for you today, because I believe that Gypsy needs a few years in reality, without metal bars and an overbearing, insane mother hovering over her, before we can make any judgments. There'll be a time when we can come back to her, her husband, and newborn daughter. But let her find her footing without us for a while before we do that. And through all this, everyone's forgotten about Nick. He's not going anywhere for now. But he too was sucked into this house of horrors, and probably believed without a doubt that he was saving Gypsy from Dee Dee in the only way that was possible. Deciding what we feel is right and wrong in this case is impossible. It's all gray. But one thing I do know for sure is that the consumers have created a media show pony, and our morbid fascination is a form of abuse just as sick as Dee Dee's. This girl's been exploited without her consent her entire life. Now, she's being exploited all over again, And we've justified it because she's in her 30s. But Gypsy's never truly been allowed to function as an adult, so why on earth should she be given the same treatment as any other adult now that she's free? If people weren't sure whether or not she should even stand trial, how can they be sure that she's in any position to consent to all of the exposure? The exploitation of Gypsy Rose Blanchard started the day she was born, and it never stopped when her mother died. Gypsy is still living a life for others' entertainment. All I can hope for is that she takes a step back now that she has a daughter, but I have a feeling that the cameras are not going to allow that. And we the viewers are to blame for that reality. But now the question needs to be posed to you. Was Gypsy's sentence fair? And is the world's criticism for her today even valid? And what about Nick? Did he get what he deserved? Or was he a victim too? And while you're at it, don't forget to like and subscribe. It only takes a second, and that second goes a long way to keep a human-produced channel on the air. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.